Luciano Monosilio is a Michelin Star chef in Rome who's famous for his carbonara. His version is very heavy on technique compared to the traditional. But is it worth all that extra effort? Well, that's what we're going to find out today, because I'm going to make his modern version side by side with the traditional. Welcome to Actually Italian. I'm Sal, and the focus on this channel is to cook some authentic Italian food to help you cook like an Italian too. I've been making carbonara for years and just doing it the traditional way. One of the things I love about making traditional carbonara is that it is pretty straightforward. It's not very complicated. It's easy to make it on a weeknight even. But then I saw a video by Alex, the French guy cooking, where he went to Rome and learned how to do it from Luciano himself. This version that's done by Monosilio is much more involved. I am pretty confident that I can pull it off, but is it worth all that extra effort? Is it going to be the version that I'm going to be making from now on? Is it that much better? Today I'm going to make both versions. I'm going to do each one step by step so you can see exactly what's involved. And then when I come to taste them, I've got a special guest that's going to help me out and give me an unbiased opinion. The first version we're going to make today is the traditional. Let's see what goes into the traditional version. For this we want to use whole eggs. The common idea is that you use 1 egg per person. The next essential ingredient is guanciale. If you can get guanciale, use it. If you can't, get the best pancetta that you can. Next, we've got pecorino romano cheese and a good dose of freshly ground black pepper. Since I'm cooking an upscale version of carbonara today, I feel like it deserves a pretty good pasta. The pasta brand that I'm using today is this Monograno by Felicetti. I'm going to use this for both recipes. To get started, I'm going to beat these 2 eggs in a bowl with a lot of pecorino. I want to basically get it thick enough where it kind of holds together a little bit. Then I'll just add freshly ground pepper, and this mix is ready for the pasta. We want to get the guanciale in a pan over kind of medium-high heat to get the rendering process going. For the traditional version, we want the guanciale to be pretty crispy. I've cut it into thin strips that'll cook quickly and get nice and crunchy. We're going to end up getting a lot of fat out of this, and that's what we're looking for. It's going to start turning a little translucent, and then it's going to start really, you'll see the fat kind of coming out of it. At that point, I want to turn this down to like medium-low, so that way we don't burn it. We'll just kind of cook it slowly just to get the rest of the fat out. As soon as you see that they look pretty crunchy, turn it off. We're going to set it aside, let it cool. Now, I separated the guanciale from the fat. The reason is because I don't know how much of the fat that we're going to use. So I didn't want to just put the pasta in the pan with all of it in there. While the guanciale was cooking, I got some water on to boil. As soon as it came to a boil, I got some salt in there, and then I put the pasta in. I want to use a little less water than I normally would, so that way we get a lot of starch in that water. That's another reason to use this pasta, because it does give off a lot of starch, which makes for a nice sauce. The pasta's al dente, and I've drained it. I put the pasta right into the cold pan. We don't want it to be hot. Then I add the egg mixture, and I want to give it a nice toss and get everything incorporated. This has to be vigorous because I'm trying to make like an emulsion here. I want to incorporate all that sauce into the pasta. Then I want to add that fat from the guanciale. And again, I need to really stir this around. I got to get a good heavy motion going. At this point, I want to take a look at the sauce itself and see if it's too thick, if it's too thin. This looks like it's just right. However, it is going to start getting absorbed by the pasta. I reserved a little bit of the cooking water just before I drain the pasta, and I'm going to add just a splash of it now just to loosen it up a little bit. This is essentially what we're looking for. We want it to be saucy but creamy and not too loose but not too thick either. This traditional version is done, so now I'm going to show you exactly how to do the Monosilio version. Make sure you stick around to the end because that's when we're going to do a side-by-side comparison of both of these pastas. Instead of whole eggs, we're going to use just the egg yolks. Another difference is the cheese itself. This isn't just pecorino cheese. There's 30% of this mix is actually Parmesan cheese, or Grana Padano is what I used. That's going to mellow out that bold and sharp pecorino flavor. Another difference is the guanciale. I'm using the same guanciale, but you'll notice that it's in bigger chunks. And that's going to add a major difference to the texture and the flavor of the final dish. And then I'm just going to have some freshly ground pepper, just like with the traditional. First things first, we're going to beat those egg yolks and add the cheese. I'm going to add that cheese a little bit at a time. We want it thick, but it could be too thick if I just dump the whole thing in. Essentially, the texture that I'm looking for is kind of like this. It is pretty thick. It's going to get thinned out later though. I've got a lot of things going on at this point. I have my double boiler going, which is just a pot with some water that I'm going to bring up to a slow boil. I've got my pasta water going, and now I need to get the guanciale started. So the same thing, I'm going in a pan with a medium-high heat, and I want to start rendering that fat. Once these chunks start getting opaque, I'll turn them around a little bit so that way we get even cooking on them. You can see the fat is starting to come out now, so I want to turn this down to medium-low. What we're looking for is for them to just start getting some color. As soon as they're golden brown on all sides, they're ready. So we're going to remove these and remove the fat as well. Now that the guanciale is done and the pasta water is boiling, we want to work on the double boiler. I've got a small pot with just about a few inches of water in there that I'm just going to bring up to a gentle boil. I'll take my glass bowl with the mixture, I'm going to put it right on top of that pot. What we need to do is make sort of a zabaglione or a hollandaise type sauce. What that entails is whipping these with a whisk and adding that fat from the guanciale. We need to keep going at this. We don't want to take a break here. If you stop, it is going to scramble. So you need to whip and whip and whip, and slowly this sauce is going to start to thicken up and it's going to get fluffy because of the air that we're whipping into it. After about 6 or 7 minutes of whisking, we can see the sauce is getting nice and thick now. I've got a spoon and I can see that it's just dripping nicely. If I scrape along the back of the spoon, it doesn't drip. This is the texture that we're looking for. Pasta's done, it's al dente, and now we've got to whip this up. We've got to mantecare this pasta so that way it all incorporates with the sauce. Now once everything's mixed and incorporated and I've got the sauce right where I want it, I'm going to add those chunks of guanciale right to the bowl. I just want to give one last check to the sauce just to make sure I don't need to add any more of the cooking liquid. I can see I've got the sauce exactly how I like it. It's thick, it's rich, it's creamy, it's ready to go. Now I'm ready to plate both of these up and get right to the tasting. I called in a little extra help today because I want an unbiased opinion when comparing these. So I brought in my wife Olga, who's usually on the other side of the camera, so today we've got her on this side. The way the tasting is going to work today is we're going to make a comparison on each of these pastas based on the sauce, the guanciale, and then the difficulty. How difficult was it to make each of these? I'm going to eat a lot of carbonara today. How do you feel about that?
I'm very hungry. Let's do it.
So I'm going to start with the sauce on the traditional pasta. I'm going to rate this one a 3.5 out of 5. It is a very creamy sauce and it is nice and rich, but it's more saucy than creamy, if that makes sense. The Monosilio version, I'm going to give a 4.5 out of 5 because it's way creamier. It's on another level. There's also a big difference in the flavor of these sauces. In the traditional one, it has that kind of bold pecorino flavor, and in the modern one, the Monosilio one, it has a much cheesier flavor because of the mix of cheeses.
I give traditional a 4, and I give the Monosilio version a 5. I always thought that the traditional version is pretty creamy, but then I tasted the Monosilio version, and that creaminess is on a completely new level for me.
Yeah.
The traditional version sauce is a bit looser, while the Monosilio version is silky and creamy and kind of becomes one with the pasta. That's what I really liked about it.
Yeah. Another essential element is the guanciale.
When it comes to guanciale, I gave the traditional version a 4 and the Monosilio version a 5. As far as the flavor of guanciale goes, they're both delicious, but the texture is very different. I have to say that I like both textures. The traditional version guanciale is crunchy, while the guanciale Monosilio version is a bit softer. But what made a difference for me personally is the flavor. In the traditional version, you mainly taste the salt, so it has the kind of like the crispy cooked bacon feel. But guanciale in the Monosilio version is really sweet. You can really taste the guanciale in this one, and that's why I gave it a 5.
Yeah, I have to agree with basically everything that she said, including the rating. I give the traditional a 4, and I give the Monosilio a 5. In the traditional, I do like that crispy, kind of almost overcooked bacon flavor,
Yeah.
but it's one note. That's it. It's just like salty in that one flavor. The Monosilio version instead has a completely different texture where it's crispy on the outside and just like melt in your mouth on the inside, sort of like a chocolate chip cookie when you think of it like that. And then there is the flavor. You get all those nuances of the guanciale when you do it the Monosilio way. Lastly, how difficult were these to make? With 5 being the most difficult, I'm going to rate the traditional a 3. The traditional version is really easy. It comes together really fast. The Monosilio version, again, I'm giving a 5 because it is more difficult. If you're going to do a double boiler, you really have to be paying attention.
Yeah.
If you slip for a second, you're not going to get the results that you wanted.
I have much less experience in cooking carbonara, but I did cook the traditional carbonara a few times, so I give it a 3.
I've had her carbonaras too, and they are very good. She does make a good one.
And I've watched Sal cooking this Monosilio version for the first time, and I give it a 6 out of 5. Being somebody who's not super experienced in the kitchen, I find it very difficult to watch the double boiler and the pasta cooking and the guanciale at the same time. For me, that's a 6.
Yeah. So which one overall would you say that you prefer? Like if in a perfect world, you're going out to eat or somebody's making it for you, which one would you rather have?
If I have it ready, I'll definitely have the Monosilio version.
Yeah.
I love how creamy it was. I love the sweetness of the guanciale. This version really plays with your senses, and that's what I liked about it.
Yeah, it's kind of the same for me. I do have to say that I prefer the Monosilio version. And if I'm going to go to a restaurant and they're going to make it, I'd be happy to eat it that way. I will make it once in a while though, like maybe for a special occasion. Yeah. What I will do though is I'm going to cook the guanciale like Monosilio does for the traditional because I really like the texture and the flavor much better. The other thing that I'll do too is mix the cheeses. Rather than just use pecorino, I'm going to use a mix. Look, the bottom line is all of this is subjective really at the end of the day, which is why I brought Olga to help me with this. Her opinions are going to be different than mine. So I really want to encourage you to make both versions yourself and decide for yourself if it's worth it or not, which one's better or not. And I would really love when you do to get into the comments and let me know what you thought. All right, we want to thank everybody for watching till the end. We'll see you in the next video. And for now, we're going to finish our lunch.